Good afternoon. I'm Donna Butts, and I've had the honor of serving as the Executive Director of Generations United for over 25 years now. Generations United's mission is to improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational collaboration, public policy, programs for the enduring benefit of all. We're the home to the National Center on Grandfamilies and the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network, a national technical assistance center, which is the first ever federally funded National Technical Assistance Center for Grandfamilies. Thank you today for joining us as we today are releasing our 10th annual State of Grandfamilies report, Building Resilience, Supporting Grandfamilies' Mental Health and Wellness. Our goal when we launched the report was to have an annual and accurate picture of the families where grandparents, other relatives, and close family friends are raising children, and to take a deep dive into an issue impacting their lives. Among other topics we focused on are food and nutrition, housing, immigration, trauma, and the opioid epidemic. And in particular, with the opioid epidemic, we were the early ones to identify that as an issue that was really impacting relative caregivers. That led to a Senate hearing, as well as a 60-minute segment. So we know that these reports have had incredible reach and resulted in public policy and practice changes that better support children and caregivers living in grandfamilies. Today, as we have a wonderful panel and experts joining us and reviewing the report, feel free to ask questions in the chat. And if there's time at the end, we'll answer them. And if not, we'll get back with you. So please do use the chat function. We're grateful that this year's report and event were made possible with the generous support of the Brookdale Foundation Group, with additional support from the Centrine Corporation. Our report was informed by mental health experts, caregivers, and young people in grandfamilies, as well as national organizations. They're the ones that really help to strengthen what you'll find in the report. We want to thank them for their invaluable input. And in particular, I want to thank the main report author, Amy Goyer, for her work on the report, and the amazing Jamal Clark, who's the Assistant Director of our National Center on Grandfamilies. It was his leadership and his dedication that brought this report to fruition. And he had an absolutely fabulous team to work with at Generations United. So thanks to you all. This report shines a light on the incredible role grandparents and other relatives play in raising more than 2.4 million of our country's children, and the increased difficulties they face as our nation is in a state of mental health emergency. While the U.S. is facing a national mental health crisis for people of all ages, it's children and adolescents that are particularly vulnerable. And for members of grandfamilies, mental health concerns are even more acute. So we are honored to open this webinar with some spoken word and poetry for young people raised in grandfamilies, and Elisa Thornton, a mental health advocate and family caregiver. Special thanks to the Family Education and Support Services of Washington State. The poems the children read are from their Voices of Children contest.
I was never happy. I was always sad. Grandma gave me a new life. It's everything but bad.
She told me I deserved loving. Now I got a huge family. One sister and tons of cousins. She means the world to me. There's nothing else I need because I got a family.
Alive by Emma, age 14. They were there for me. They held my hand when times were dark, helped me see the light in the dead of night. When I would cry, standing by my side, they said, "You will be all right." They didn't lie, they cried with me, fought battles with me. I almost died. They stood by my side, regardless of time. They are the reason I am alive.
Take a deep breath and remember the first time you truly felt safe. Did you know that this was the beginning of your brave space? Who was the first one to build you up and make you feel loved? Who was the first person to embrace you when you needed that hug? See, she is my why, and I will find a way to care for her no matter how. She fills my cup when it's empty and she makes me smile. It's hard to express the words I'm trying to find because this is more than love when she is my bloodline. I am the glue that holds this all together. These are the years she will hold in her heart forever. Having her not go in the system avoided additional trauma. See, in my household, we don't tolerate, accept, or allow in drama. You see, kinship is friendship. Do you remember family time, playing with cousins? Well, now it's all shattered and disconnected from what wasn't. Today, I am the grandmother. I hold the torch. I am the one sitting in a rocking chair on my own porch, letting the kids run free because I know life is much better now because of me. We hold on to these stories that are told. It takes a village to raise a child, so we have to keep fighting to keep each of our generations united. Thank you.
Thank you for those powerful and poignant reflections. As we find ourselves in the midst of a mental health crisis, this year's report considers why children and caregivers have been especially hit hard. Grandfamilies often form suddenly, as many of you know, and usually out of very tragic events that separate children from their parents. Those include death of a parent, mental health, substance use disorders, deportation or incarceration, and others. Their trauma is exacerbated by recent distressing events and ongoing crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic, racial violence, and the opioid epidemic. All have further intensified mental health concerns of the members of grandfamilies. Our report elevates two major factors: racial disparities and substance use, most noticeably opioids. First, grandfamilies are diverse and exist across various geographic areas, socioeconomic statuses, races, and ethnicities. Yet they're disproportionately Black, African American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and in some areas, Latino. Research shows that the COVID-19 pandemic had a disproportionate impact on Black, Latino, and American Indian communities, with implications for poor physical health and mental health outcomes. Second, between 2002 and 2019, grandparents reporting parent substance use as a reason for caring for their grandchildren jumped from 21% to 40%. That's a stark increase. The states with the highest percentages of grandparents raising grandchildren are also the states with the highest opioid prescribing rates. I just did an interview earlier today with West Virginia, which is one of those states that's been hit so hard. Despite these challenges, research shows when children can't remain in their parents' care, They do best in the care of grandparents or other kin. A loving and familiar relative or close family friend can help to buffer the trauma of separation and provide essential roots for children to thrive. Compared to children in foster care with non-relatives, children in the care of relatives have better mental health and behavioral health outcomes. They have higher levels of stability. They're not as likely to experience as many placements as foster children do. They have a greater sense of belonging. And most importantly, they report feeling loved. They're loved. Yet they need support. Children bring with them past experiences of trauma. 28% of children in kinship care have experienced neglect. More than 1 in 4 have experienced parental substance use, and 11% have experienced physical abuse. They don't leave those experiences at the door when they move into a grandparent or relative's home. The trauma continues to cause significant problems, even when they're safely living in a loving grandfamily home. Children who've experienced trauma live with learning disabilities, chronic health conditions, and mental health conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder. The caregiver's mental health is impacted as well. Grandfamily caregivers often step into their role unexpectedly and experience chronic stress, not only from the common stressors of child rearing, which many people who are raising children know, but also housing strains, financial pressures, social isolation, food insecurity, and other issues like those on the screen, brought on by the sudden responsibility of raising children, who, as I mentioned earlier, often come with special needs. And we hear about this often: dreams deferred. I was going to go on a cruise. I was going to spend time with my friends. I was going to enjoy my empty nest. And yet they say yes when that knock comes in the middle of the night. These factors hit caregivers hard. Research shows that kinship caregivers are more likely to become depressed than unrelated caregivers. But the power of family is strong. Youth in kinship care consistently show more positive changes in their social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes than youth in non-relative foster care. And when caregivers get the support they need to address depression, the outcomes are even stronger. Yet getting access to these supports and services is a huge challenge. Children in grandfamilies experience limited access to mental health services for depression, stress, and behavioral or emotional issues because of stigma, accessibility, cost, and lack of information about grandfamilies. As a result, children in foster care with relatives are less likely to use mental health services than children in non-kinship foster care. We must do better for grandfamilies. Today, you'll hear directly from them about their realities, strengths, and challenges. Then you'll hear from our longtime colleague and friend, renowned kinship and mental health expert, Dr. Joseph Crumley, about effective ways to support grandfamilies, build on their strengths, and help mitigate the impact of trauma. Finally, we close with the recommendations for practitioners, policymakers, and researchers. So we're honored today to have a wonderful panel joining us to speak firsthand about challenges and strengths of grandfamilies as they relate to mental health and wellness. We're thrilled to have Sonia Emerson join us today and facilitate the panel. Sonia is a passionate advocate for child welfare and social justice. She has experience in kinship care, mental health, racial equity, youth homelessness, and LGBT+ human rights, with experience working on community and national projects that include the Family First Initiative, National Quality Improvement Center, and the Human Rights Campaign. She's also, and I think very importantly, a loving mother and aunt who cares for 3 nieces and her curious 2-year-old. So Sonia, take it away and thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. Wow, what a powerful spoken word by our very own Elisa. That was incredible. Good afternoon, everyone. To all of my dear colleagues, family, and friends, I'm thrilled that you all are able to join us. And I'm also thrilled to be here to moderate such an important conversation around grandfamilies' mental health and wellness. We're doing the work, you all, and this is really exciting. This is really progressive, and I'm just so happy that Generations United is providing a platform for conversations like this to happen. When I was first approached with the opportunity to facilitate such a critical conversation, I actually reflected on my own lived experience, both as a caregiver to my 3 beautiful nieces, formally, actually, and my own individual mental health and wellness journey as well. I remember throughout me being a caregiver to my brilliant, beautiful nieces, how prominent mental health was and how desperate I was to get them connected to anything that addressed their needs, and how little resources were available at that time. And those that did exist, we didn't qualify for, sadly. It took a toll on our wellness, right? On their wellness, on my own wellness, as well as my family at large. Mental health and wellness impacts not only Grandfamilies, but the collective. And creating and holding brave spaces to share the nuances of those experiences creates a collective opportunity for deepened compassion, learning, and healing. And so with that being said, I'm so honored to be graced with each of our amazing panelists today. Their wisdom and their stories, we don't earn those rights to hear these stories, right? But they've graced us with that gift, and I'm so grateful for that. The report lifted up several times how critical it is for young people to be connected to their grandfamilies, and how important it is to have those connections reinforced by adequate resources and support. Donna, thank you for sharing such powerful data with us. And as compelling as the data is, and always is, we also know how even more powerful it is to hear the stories and the real life experiences from those who are closest in proximity to those issues. And so I'd like to just jump in today. And I'm honored to facilitate a panel of such incredible powerhouses and hopefully friends, because I just have enjoyed the time that I have been able to spend with you all. With me, we have Brittany Barrows, who was raised by her grandmother and has previously been a foster caregiver for her siblings. She's overcome multiple entries into the Michigan's foster care system and family separations. She's graduated from the University of Michigan, whoop whoop, Michigan. I'm from Ohio, so we're rivalries, with a scholarship, and she has earned a master's degree in social work. She's now pursuing her second master's degree in public policy with a passion for creating public policy changes to benefit young people. Her goal is to work in federal child welfare policy. Welcome, Brittany. Our next panelist with us today is Angela Clements, a grandmother, as well as a licensed treatment foster parent who prioritizes the importance of keeping children within their families. She has dedicated her career to providing healing services and empowering families. As a parent peer specialist, Angela draws from not only her personal experience, but she uses her personal experience to support families and reduce trauma within the African American community. She is also a Generations United Grand Voice member representing Wisconsin. Welcome, Angela. And lastly, our final panelist, Bob Rubel, his life took an unexpected turn, actually, when he was asked by Child Protective Services to become his 8-year-old niece's primary caregiver after Child Protective Services removed her from her mother's care. Bob was the only family member who could care for her. Bob stepped up and became dedicated to his niece's life as well as her well-being. He became her legal guardian, and as an uncle, he continues to advocate for kinship caregivers and strive to improve support systems for families in similar situation as his own. Bob is involved in the California's Alliance of Caregivers, as well as serves as a board member of the Foster Kinship. In addition, he represents California as a Generations United Grand Voice as well, working to positively impact and change the lives of kinship families. Welcome to all of our amazing panelists. Give some love in the chat. I love to see it. They have such incredible things to say. And so we're going to actually just dive right into today's conversation. And actually, Brittany, I see that beautiful smile. And so I'm headed your way. I'd love to kick off with you, Brittany, today. And the first question for you, dear, is what types of trauma did you and your siblings, if you like to speak to that, experience before you came to live with your grandmother?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sonia, for leading such an very important and fruitful dialogue. Um, Before coming to live with my grandma, we experienced family separation. We experienced the deepest dives of poverty. My siblings and I were placed in foster care in Michigan, not once, but twice, due to substance abuse, sexual abuse, as well as mental health from my mother. And the traumas that I experienced were, I will never forget the time when I was living in a residential facility, which is not a typical home-like environment for young people in foster care. And in that residential facility, I was kicked out, and I was kicked out of the residential facility. I will never forget the court hearing that we had about, well, where is Brittany gonna go next now that she's gotten kicked out of our residential facility. And I remember the social worker that I had, who actually inspired me to be the social worker I never got to have, because of how poorly she treated me. She was advocating to my jurist, that I be placed in residential facilities, in a lockdown facility until I was 18. And I was 14 at the time. So she wanted me to be in a residential for 4 more years. I remember like writing up my speech and fiercely advocating to the judge, 14-year-old little Brittany, crying my eyes out to the judge. Like I really wanted to be with my grandmother. And the judge, who was thankfully on the side of family preservation and lover of kinship families, he placed me with my grandmother and did not go with my caseworker's recommendation. So and through my time at the residential facility, they would starve us. They've had multiple like CPS cases. I lost like 20 pounds in like 2 weeks. I developed an eating disorder, and all I knew is I wanted to be in my grandmother's home.
Wow. Thank you, Brittany. And I want to sit with that for a minute, because that's tough, right? And you lifted up several things that stand out to me. It started with poverty, right? And a lot of times it often does, neglect or poverty, and how you were displaced and you moved around. And not only did you not have a sense of permanency on your journey, Brittany, is what I'm hearing, but even a sense of belonging, it sounds like, so I appreciate you for one, being brave enough to kick us off today. And also just like your transparency about your experience prior to you coming to live with your grandmother. Thank you. So similar to this discussion, Brittany, that Brittany and I are having, I really want to actually turn our attention to speaking with you, Angela, and you, Bob. I know that you all had some insights of your own as it relates to this topic. And so, Angela, I'm actually going to kick off with you. Similar question to the discussion that Brittany and I are sharing right now. What types of trauma did the children that you're raising or have raised in your experience, what types of traumas made for concern for their mental health and their safety?
The neglect part, the mother's mental health not met, and also just abuse of verbal, physical, and sexual, that I knew it was going to cause more problems as a aging versus just thinking they were going to grow out of it or get in a better situation. Just that impact alone that I have seen that results to more of human trafficking, drugs, and just criminal behavior. So those are the concerns when I had seen what my relatives was going through that
Yeah.
kept having me fight for.
Thank you, Angela. And Bob, same question.
Well, pretty much what Angela just said. My niece was obviously mental abuse, definitely physical abuse, and of course she was raped by my sister's boyfriends. So I'm sorry, that's a little it gets a little tough to talk about that one, but it's the same kind of thing. This poor child trying to figure out what that all is about, and 20 years later, I can still see some of the scars there, um, that she's still suffering because of that. So that's the thing that made me really think that there has to be something, I can help her and stand beside her and basically make sure she knows none of that was her fault.
Mm, thank you, Bob. And it's so funny because as we prepare today for this conversation, I saw the parallels right across stories, you, Brittany, and Angela. And so Brittany, I would love to hear, because I know that you were also not only raised by your grandmother, but you also caregive for your siblings. And so I want to throw this question your way as well of, what concerns you when it came to your siblings' mental health and or safety, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of whirlwind of, trauma within that own question, right? Because um I my little sister's dad passed away, and our mom's rights were permanently terminated by the courts. And so I became my little sister's caregiver. I became her foster caregiver through the state. And I was only 21 years old at the time and in undergraduate school. And my little sister, the death of her father, like I said, we shared the same mom, but different dads. So her dad was my stepdad. And she her the death of her dad definitely took a very big toll on her mental health, obviously as a 14-year-old. And it took a toll on me too, given that he was my stepdad, like a father figure in my life. And so when I was raising her at my 2-bedroom apartment on Section 8, her mental health challenges became so much to the point where, you know, she would punch holes in the walls, try to fight my neighbors, had the ambulance and police over all the time. But it was because she was just a 14-year-old girl, and she transitioned because of her dad dying and our mom's rights being permanently terminated. You know, she also transitioned from multiple homeless shelters, and this is at 14 years old too. Coming to live with me, she just had a lot of sadness and anger, rightfully so. But unfortunately, when it came to my landlord's hands were tied, and per his supervisor, if she continued on with her behaviors that were stemming from her mental health, it was either she had to leave or they would evict me. And so at that moment, I realized with a lot of regret that I had to give my sister back to the foster care system, because I was on Section 8 at the time. And if I were to get evicted, that's like a penalty under Section 8, the Section 8 housing voucher. And, like it was very traumatic to have to give her back. And, her mental health challenges, it was a vicious cycle of her mental health challenges and my mental health challenges. I, lost my stepdad. I lost a friend to suicide at around the same exact time. My ex-boyfriend and I went through a very bad breakup. I was flunking out of school, and I wasn't there mentally equipped to handle such behavioral challenges given that we were both grieving the life of our father, essentially. And so yeah, being the caregiver and being caregived, it definitely provides an interesting perspective. um I used to say, and I'll just briefly say this. I used to think, like, why would foster parents give up on me? Like, I had a lot of foster parents kick me out of their home, or residential facilities kick me out. But then I also came with a lot of behavioral and mental health challenges too, and just the burden, the emotional burden it places on families when there's a lot of unaddressed needs of children that are going through these situations. And even so, like, unaddressed mental health and food security and housing and transportation and necessities of grand families, it's a vicious cycle. So I just want to just pause there and, yeah, hold space for that.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Brittany and Angela and Bob. When we talk about concerns for safety and mental health, through all of your stories, I'm hearing themes around loss, right? And unaddressed trauma. And we've had the opportunity to talk about those things, right? Intergenerational trauma has come up a couple of times. And so as we're thinking and talking about the, mental health concerns for those that we're raising and or have raised, I want to actually ask a question, and I'm going to go back and draw my attention and shift a little bit here to Angela and Bob once again. And Bob, I'll start off with you. I would love to know, as someone who's caregiving for your niece, was there ever any mental health concerns for their parents?
Well, my sister, actually, it kind of goes back to when I was 8 years old. Parents got divorced. Um, Mom was out doing her thing. I was the oldest. I became parentified pretty much at 8 years old with my two siblings. As we grew older, the trauma, all that stuff continued on until my mom committed suicide in 1920, right before my 21st birthday. And that stopped that influence. However, with my two siblings, that was the damage was already done. And then, of course, my sister becomes pregnant for the umpteenth time, decides to keep the child, and what she learned and observed growing up from my mother passed on to her, and she continued um, that with my niece. And that kind of leads us all to where I am today, sitting on this panel.
Yeah, thank you. And you lifted up an important point of, you just don't know what you don't know, right? And it started, generations ago, Bob, in your story. So thank you for lifting that. Angela?
Yes, even when my granddaughter was first born, and her dad had concerns of when he was seeing what was going on at an early age with my granddaughter. And when he introduced me to the young lady, I remember having the mom, her mother, and I used to work in Genesis, which is a drug and rehab. And I remember the story of that little girl, how her mother used to sell her to different drug houses just to get her needs met. So I knew then what that child, which is the mother, experienced as in trauma and had mental health of her own just by knowing that family history. So um, that's why I was so compassionate and wanted to heal a family as a whole. So even being safe with my granddaughter, I also work towards building a healthy relationship so that can help my granddaughter also.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much for answering that question. And, Angela, you spoke to kind of the imminent threats that exist, in the world around your grandbaby, right? And like the concerns you had for her safety, as well as the things that she had endured prior to coming into your care. So I just, I thank you for that. And we spoke a little bit earlier, and that really stood out to me. And also, the need for, you just kind of spoke to your granddaughter's mother of saying like there just was a need, right? There just was a need and it wasn't being addressed. And we see that throughout the report, right? What happens when we don't have those needs met and the impact that has on grand families. So thank you all so much for lifting that up. I'm going to ask you, Angela, speaking about, our own mental health, or, a reflection of our grandbabies, and, Bob, in your case, your niece, and, for you, Brittany, your siblings. I want to ask you, Angela, how has raising your granddaughter, what has that looked like? Has that impacted or affected your own mental health, your stress levels, your physical health, or even your social life? How has that shown up for you, Angela?
Well, I noticed even before her coming to stay with me, just the battle of going back and forth to court, a lot of weight gain, hair loss. And that's the only way I knew that it was affecting me, by seeing that I wasn't caring for myself. Um, because I work in this field and have all these classes, and then all this training, I figure I had it together, but I learned it's very personal when it comes to your own family versus working with other families. Um, I took therapy, support groups, definitely a lot of support groups. And I learned that it's a difference between self-care and self-love. So I do both of those. Um, and with that being said, it doesn't seem like it's such a toll once you are able to care for yourself. Because if you're not healthy, you're not able to be there for that
Yeah.
child that you say you want to do better. So I definitely had to focus on that as a whole.
Yeah. And that's a process, right, Angela? Right? Like learning to take care of yourself while navigating all of the throws that life is throwing our way. So I appreciate that. And Bob, I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience raising your niece, how has that affected your mental health and your stress levels and so forth?
Well, at the beginning, it's a big whirlwind uh, thing with the county. This is a formal case. She was removed. And I think once the dust settled and the phone calls started happening daily, 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 I realized how frustrated I became. And it angered me that I wasn't given any tools. I wasn't given any direction. I didn't have biological children. So I was frustrated with the lack of all of that, because I knew I needed something. I just didn't know what I needed. And what I didn't need um, was 28 different types of situations and having to learn all of them. This was my situation, this was my family, and it was all over the place. It was hard to find. So, hence my ability to say, I'm not taking no for an answer, and pick up the phone. If I didn't get the right answer, you hung up and you called somebody else. And I see Angela laughing or smiling, because that's what you have to do. So it was frustrating, as time went on. Unfortunately, uh, I love wine, and I probably loved wine a little too much. Never in front of my child, because then I would just be, or my niece, sorry. It's hard to figure out what to call her sometimes, but I didn't want to repeat what she grew up with. I wanted to show her that there was something different, but it was a little bit of a struggle. It made the batteries, unfortunately, it made the batteries recharge so you can get up and fight another day. And that was a little frustrating. So I had to get that under control. And it helped more once I started learning about trauma, um, and wishing that I had known at the beginning what I knew, what I was learning there, because I could have done a better job. But I don't know if that answers your question all the way.
Bob, you did a perfect job. There's no right answer, right? Like, or wrong answer, I should say. There is a right answer. And I do just appreciate you all so much for talking about how it shows up in our physical beings, right? As well as like how it impacts our own mental health. You all drove it home. There's nothing else more to say. Brittany, I'm coming to you. You know, as we're having this conversation around the way that mental health shows up for caregivers, I really want to talk about the other side. Being someone who was raised by your grandmother, I'm interested in knowing, how did the challenges and instability and trauma you experienced before and after living with your grandmother, how did that affect your own mental health and your physical health, education, work, and your social life?
Absolutely. So, yeah, the trauma that I experienced with family separation before being reunited with my grandmother after my mom's rights were terminated, it's led a lot of permanent scars called mental health diagnoses, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, ADHD, and actually, you know, after I went with my grandmother, I found like a time to just take a deep breath and heal, you know, from my foster care experience. And but after, unfortunately, you know, once my grandmother became my guardian, what was really hard and something I still grieve today is my grandma is a badass warrior, okay? Like she raised, you know, her parents, or she raised her children as a single mother, uh 3-story bedroom house, worked for General Motors in Detroit for like 35 plus years. And you know, she was taking me to school, loving me. I will never forget the times where she would scratch my back at night while I was watching TV, make me chocolate chip cookies or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I will never forget the times where she would like put up a little pool for me and my siblings to play in as kids in her backyard. And, you know, when she got guardianship of me, starting after when I turned 16 to 18, um, she developed dementia. She developed a blindness called macular degeneration. She developed you know, her diabetes were getting worse, her arthritis in her knees and her shoulders were getting worse. She fell and broke both of her hips. And so she was not in a place to caregive for me anymore. So when I was 16, it started becoming, which I'm so grateful I got to be in this role, is like I started taking care of her, even though she was my guardian. So I started taking her to her appointments, you know, driving. I just got my license a month ago type of deal. I started changing her toilets. I started feeding her. And, you know, most people in child welfare would say that's not okay. A 16-year-old taking care of an adult, that's not okay. But in my family and in my culture, that's what we do for each other. Like that's kin right there. That's blood. Um, we support each other regardless. So although I grieve that, you know, child welfare, after that, like I turned 18, I was no longer a minor, but my sister was still living with my grandmother. So there was a lot of child protective services calls that my grandmother could no longer take care of my little sister. And that's when, right before her dad died, that's when my sister transitioned to a homeless shelter. Grandmother, to no fault of her own, lost guardianship over my sister, but because of her health needs of dementia, uh, blindness, and diabetes and arthritis, and eventually they put my grandma in a nursing home. And you know, I grieve, like, you know, for example, my siblings still live with at my grandmother's home while my grandma's a nursing home. But my siblings are so young, they're teenagers, and then they, you know, started paying the mortgage, and the mortgage went into foreclosure, so I took out like $13,000 in student loan debt to pay for my grandma's mortgage. And like I grieve that like my grandmother's in a nursing home and not at home where she wants to be. I grieve that I wanted to do so much more for her than pay her mortgage. I wanted to buy her a whole house for her so she would no longer have to worry about that debt. I wanted to make sure my grandmother didn't have to struggle through macular degeneration, dementia, diabetes, multiple arthritis spots in her body. And my mental health has been a journey. And to be honest, I got into some criminal trouble. I don't even like that word criminal or what have you, but I got into some legal trouble, and I was placed into mental health court. And this is after my sister's dad died, and grandma's in a nursing home. And I was placed into mental health court, which is a restorative justice court program for those that have committed their crimes due to their mental health. And I was charged, and but they put me under like this awesome restorative justice based therapeutic approach. Like, they put me in therapy, they got me on the right medications, they put me in support groups, and I was able to heal from like that vicious incarceration cycle that I was in. I was also a JJ ward, meaning I was in the juvenile justice system. I was charged as an adult at 17 years old for some stuff. And like, my mental health has also gotten me into legal trouble. I've dropped out of school, and it's crazy. What's really cool is I remember being an undergrad and flunking out of one of my semesters to going to the University of Michigan, go blue, by the way, being a straight A student, a 4.0 student in the Masters of Social Work program, which is considered the #1 in the entire world. So there's trials and tribulations, right? There's always pain, but I think coming to this webinar, I'm turning that pain into power and policy.
I mean, Brittany, you first of all, look at the chat. People are going crazy about all of our panelists, but Brittany, wow. Thank you. That's all I can say. But also honoring that, like you said, it wasn't an easy journey, and you said it's a journey, right? Evermore. And so as we think about, those things, you lifted up how it started, and there even seemed to be a lack of resources, right? And a lot of times, and I'm so glad you mentioned the cultural nuances of being where you're from, right? And like in your family, you named it, right? Like, you had much pride in stepping up, and what a beautiful thing. And I know your grandmother is just so proud of you. So yes, thank you. And so much love and respect in the chat for you. But you talked about your journey to education, right? As well as some resources that helped you usher you along, right? And so when we think about support and resources and services, and this question is open for all of you all, what services and supports and resources have been most beneficial for your own mental health as we reflect on our own mental health? And anyone can kick us off.
Well, with me, I participate in Wisconsin. It's called Kids Matters, and they have phenomenal support groups where it actually helps you way before you become a grandparent, a parent again as a grandparent. They had a lot of support groups that talks about trauma. They even ordered us a book that stated The Body Keeps Scores. That was like, wow. Just the way they build you up and prepare you, as in, especially if you've been out the game for a long time and haven't had kids in your home for many years. The support groups, they have a lot of activities that they have us go to. So, but even if you're, not fortunate enough to be able to pay for things, they doing it for free, like zoo days. So just some of the stuff that comes through my email, like, oh my God, they throw a phenomenal Christmas party where it's like the gifts, it's like you didn't even tell them what your grandchild likes, and how the Santa's there, just the memories. So it did a lot for me in teaching me because, like I said, I don't know where kids go anymore. So just the fact that they keep you in the loop. And that's the only place at this time that I seen works for me. And it's called Kids Matter as far as legal, book bags, I mean, even hair care products. And like I stated, by that only being the only program, I will hope one day to build in the community so it can be more people, because then more people might want to step up. But just to feel alone when you get the child and you feel like, man, I want her to have good social skills, relationships, and yet and still you don't even know what that looks like again. So
Angela, earlier when we were talking, if you don't mind me sharing, you said something that really struck me. And you said, I hope to be a resource someday, right? Because they didn't exist. And I'm like, you are the resource, right? You are. You, Brittany, Bob, you are the resource. This is resourceful, right? Conversation. So I would just want to thank you for being the resource. And Bob, similar to Angela, I know you have had some support yourself. And so I'd love to hear what services and support has looked like for you in your own mental health journey.
Thank you. Well, as of, I go back 20 years when I first brought my niece home, and obviously no tools, nothing. I was really getting frustrated. And somebody mentioned to me one day, you should go to a group meeting. And I wasn't that kind of guy. I was like, okay, I'm gonna walk in there, we're gonna sit in a circle, I'm gonna say my name, they're all gonna say hi, Bob. And it just wasn't anything for me. But I finally went. I walked in the room, and I thought I was in the wrong room, um, because there was 20 women in there, most of them grandparent of age and stuff like that. I thought I was in the wrong room. But once I realized that, wait a minute, you 20 people are also doing the same thing, it was just a huge weight that came off of me to know that I could talk about what I was going through and the issues and with everything to other people that could understand them in different ways. I mean, obviously 20 people have 20 different stories and stuff like that. But to me, that was my awakening. That was my bolt. And once that happened, I started getting connections to all kinds of different things. And I just couldn't stop learning. The second thing that I think that in my case where the support was, is it was a course I took called Love and Logic. Taught me a little bit about what was going on. I had to do that at 10 years old, and I had to come back and do it when she was 17. It's different things. I took a night class, and I always say this wrong, so somebody help me on the panel, from the National Traumatic Stress Network. Somebody was teaching that at a church, and I went through there, and that's the one that made me realize that, oh man, I could have used that. I wish I knew that. And that set my course to wanting to become an advocate, and then also support people and become a peer. So um, to me, those were the two things. Those are the two things that gave me hope that what I'm doing isn't all for naught. What I'm doing isn't always going to be perfect, but I started to develop the tools to be able to work with it. And
Yes, thank
that's
you.
kind of
Sonia, can I respond quickly?
I was going right to you, my dear. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just want to respond quickly to Bob. Bob, a recurring theme that I hear, from this conversation, and what I hear a lot of people say, and a lot of grand families and caregivers say, and I've said this before as a caregiver, is, I wish I would have done X. I wish I would have known Z. I wish I would have thought of why. And a quote that I heard actually a couple days ago, which is very powerful to what we're talking about here, is forgive yourself for what you knew and the resources and what you were able to do at the time. Allow yourself grace. Caregiving doesn't come with a manual, as you said before. And I just gently push you to, forgive that self of you, or just be graceful with your past self for what you didn't know or what you could have done. Like, it's okay. Like, we're living in the moment now.
Brittany, I just appreciate you. It makes me feel like me and Angela were talking earlier, like we're sitting in the living room together because one, thank you so much. And it's so true. Grace, right? And just knowing that you just didn't know what you didn't know, and knowing that support groups and things like Love and Logic exist, and Christmas parties that will, just give that extra special love and finding sense of community. Bob, I just want to go back and say that someone really highlighted that it resonated with them that you aren't alone, right? We are not alone. And it's so powerful every time I hear you speak, Bob, because you talk about, that feeling of otherness and like no longer, knowing that there's others and you're not othered anymore. So thank you all so much. Wow, like I could stay here forever, really. So I just want to extend a thank you, chat, show some love to our amazing panelists who was generous enough to share their wisdom and their words with us, and their hearts and their stories and expertise. Thank you so much for the work that you do and that you will continue to do. Yeah, thank you so much. And so with that being said, I am pleased to now turn over our program to our kinship subject matter expert, Dr. Joseph Crumbly. If you don't know him, you need to know him. This guy is phenomenal. I have had the privilege of hearing about him for years and have finally put a face to this name and this shaker, this mover and shaker. So Dr. Joseph Crumbly is a nationally recognized kinship expert with nearly 40 years of experience in family therapy, training, and consultation. His expertise span from kinship, adoption, foster care, and much more that we probably don't have enough time to name because he's done such phenomenal work in the field. He has provided consultation to notably organizations and offered expert testimony, at high-profile institutions. Dr. Crumbly, although retired, continues to engage in speaking engagements with a focus on the strengths of families and kinship care. To learn more about Dr. Crumbly, we could throw it in the chat. Please visit his website and get in touch at drcrumbly.com. If someone in the team could throw that in the chat. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Crumbly. Our panelists have shared some amazing insights, as well as their experience as young people and caregivers, highlighting how crucial mental health is and how it can impact the safety and the well-being and permanency of their families. And so we've heard a lot about family dynamics today, right? And how they can affect those factors for caregivers, professionals, and even providers, right? And so, Dr. Crumbly, can you provide some helpful tips to those here joining us today based on the insights that was shared from our expert panel today?
Yes, thank you so much for this invitation and you see me a little overwhelmed, by what was shared with us and the experience and the knowledge. One of the things that was so beautiful about about the presenters, is that they became their own support group at the end. Did you see what happened? It's like we weren't even in the room. And I just thought that was so beautiful, the way they were able to support and just be able to connect with each other and start talking to each other. But yeah, I just want to throw that out because what we saw today in this panel was what to me epitomizes the strength of kinship care. I mean, we heard about the trauma, we heard about what people went through, we heard about the trauma from the environment, from systems, from relationship. But what we saw also was the strength of kinship care. And when I talk about the strength and why kinship care works, one of the things that's the strength of kinship care is family dynamics. And what I'm talking about there that you saw today was family members able to assume new roles, new responsibilities, new relationships in order to keep children in the family and not having to go into the system. Because that's what makes kinship care so powerful, is that the family is able to regroup I mean, listen to the stories, In a matter of hours, Bob found space. Angela, in a matter of hours, found was able to step into taking care of her children. Brittany, in a matter of days, was able to find food, clothing, shelter, schools. So that's what I mean by the strengths of kinship care, and be able to assume those new roles, those new relationships, and those new responsibilities. That's the strength, and everyone epitomizes it. We even saw how the children, Brittany, we saw the strength of the children in terms of being able to adapt and adjust. She even adapted and adjusted again when she started taking care of grandma. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the strengths of kinship care and family dynamics being that strength. We're talking about the strength of kinship family being able to assume new roles, new relationships, and new responsibilities, and that's what we saw. But it has its cost. We also saw that today too. Kinship care has the strength, but to be able to adjust like that has its cost. And it takes the physical cost and the physical tolls. Bob talked about the drinking, Angela talked about the physical issues related to weight, Brittany making those adjustments, and she was like the sandwich generation. That's what I don't even think she didn't even get a chance to really talk about that, of being able to take care of not only her siblings but also a caregiver herself, in terms of her grandmother. And but it takes its cost. It takes its cost in terms of depression. It takes its toll in terms of physical tolls. It takes its emotional tolls. But we also heard conversation around that as well. How do you help families adapt? How do we help families adjust? Because that's the strength. But how do we support families to make the adaptation and to make the adjustments? That's the other piece that goes along with this. Okay. Because they weren't ready. There wasn't any support. They did it out of caring, out of obligation. So if I had to identify anything, some common things that Brittany kept talking about, and that Bob and Angela, it was we saw the strength of families being able to adapt, to adjust, but you also have to talk about how to help caregivers and the family make the adjustments, to support them when they make the adjustments and those adaptations.
Mm.
Oh, what you think? What you think,
I'm about to
Sonia?
fall out of my chair is what I think. And if it wasn't so secure and I wasn't close to this laptop, I would have been, falling out of this chair. You brought us right home. And it's so powerful when you talk about the cost. And what's so interesting to me, throughout my experience, speaking with our amazing panelists, as well as beyond in the work that I do with families, you never hear people weigh the cost. They never say, what's it going to cost me, right? And that's strength, right? Maybe like we don't want that strength sometimes, but that's the strength that in the power of our families, right?
Yes.
They don't think about it, they just do it, right?
Yeah.
And so they jump into action. And so on, systems in, it's the responsibility to make sure that those resources exist so that it can be, reinforced, and that the power of their family stays strong, that strength stays there because they have the necessary support. So you took us right home. And so I appreciate you talking about the cost of it and what that looks like. And we can alleviate what the costs look like together, right? It's our collective responsibility to do so. And so, thank you, Dr. Crumbly. You're perfect. And so in closing, I would love for you to share with us, Dr. Crumbly, 3 takeaways, one for caregivers, one for young people, and one for professionals. Just a few takeaways for us.
Okay. For the caregivers, you have to be okay for the kids and the family to be okay. Self-care. Did you hear those words that came out today? And I loved what Angela said, self-love. Oh my goodness. In fact, you're asking, when I think about caregivers, we are so often asking them to do for their children and for their families what wasn't done for them. Because of their families and their legacies. Did you hear that trauma? Did you hear what Bob went through? Did you hear that hurt? They were doing this on dry cells, on fumes. And we're asking them to do these things for the children. And I'm saying the family, but Angela hit it on the head. We're not just doing this for families, for the children, we're doing this for families. One of the strengths of kinship care is that not only are you helping to change the child, but you also have that family to reinforce the change and to reinforce what you're doing with them. And that's, again, the power of legacies, you see. But caregivers, again, we have to come up with those supports. So for caregivers, you have to be okay in order for the children to be okay. Be aware of your hurt, of what you didn't get. Make sure you're getting the support and you're getting the healing so
Mm.
that you can be there for the children. So you are going to have to know when to put yourself first. Because as Sonia said, you just tend to just do it and not look at what you need. If anything, look at what you need. Get that reinforcement, get that. And plus, the children love to see you able to take care of yourself. They need to see you take care of yourself so that they don't have to feel responsible, so they don't feel like it's their fault, so they can feel that they're a support to you. So they need you to be okay and look okay. So it's not about just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself so that the kids can see you okay. Because when you're okay, they feel okay. For the children, when I look at Brittany and I look at what she went through, for Brittany, I guess for Brittany, it's let the family, and for the children, it's let the family heal you. Okay. Because a lot of times the children don't know what to do until as they're getting older. Okay. And the hurt and the anger comes out on the family, the holes in the wall, the anger, but for the kids, stay with the family, become aware of how you need them, allow yourself to need, allow yourself to accept the love, allow yourself, to be healed, allow yourself to take the risk of being loved, because a lot of your lessons have been those closest to you hurt you. Kindness is a sign of weakness. Those closest to you abuse you. The needs of adults take precedent to those of the children, to those of children. Those are the attitudes that have come from survival. So for the kids and for the youth, it's being able to recognize those survival skills and be able to look at the family, relearn, reuse, reconnect. For the professionals, these are not just clinical issues we're talking about. We're talking about issues that are permanency. We're talking about issues that are well-being, and we're talking about permanency issue and safety issue. If you don't address family dynamics, if you don't address mental health and wellness of the entire family, our children will go back into care. So you start with those relatives first, making sure they know and get those needs and get those supports, as well as the concrete things. They're so caught up in the day-to-day issues of food, clothing, shelter. Get those things, but then you've got to also provide them with that emotional support as well, because they have to be okay in order for the kids to be. Did you hear what Angela and Bob and Brittany said? If I had only known. That's our role. Make sure they know. Make sure that they get the lessons. Make sure that there is the prep. For relative caregivers, it's on-the-job training. So you've got to start their training and that preparation there so that they won't keep saying, if only I knew. That's our job as professionals, getting those resources, getting those supports so that they won't have to be saying, if only I knew. That's our job. And as Brittany says, it's policies. Kinship families can't be looked at as support families, as temporary families. They need to be looked at as mainstream families. They're not going anywhere. Kinship care has become the support for not only foster care and adoption, but the support for families in general. They've always been there. They've now got to be mainstream as permanent families in society. They're not going anywhere. I'm babbling now. I better
No,
stop.
you're not. Oh my goodness. It's so rich. I'm sitting here. I wish I had a pen and paper, Dr. Crumbly, because I mean, wow, right? Your reflections and what you're bringing forth to this conversation is so valuable. Even talking about like your advice to caregivers, right, to make sure that they're seeking the healing and support that they need first. And this idea around allowance, right, for young people. And lastly, like, my favorite is just to make sure that they have those resources, and that the professionals are being resourceful, and making sure those things exist. That is the responsibility. And so we all have a responsibility in that, and I appreciate you so much. Wow.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm so moved. I want to thank you. It's not the end, so don't leave us, Dr. Crumbley,
Oh,
but I would
okay.
love to transition us to a space where we open up the space for some questions from our attendees and our friends and our family and our colleagues. Love you all. So we would love to hear some questions. Drop some questions in the chat, interact with us for a moment. Any curiosities or questions you have for the panelists or Dr. Crumbley himself, we would love to hear it. You're getting so much love, Dr. Crumbley.
Oh, thank you.
Any questions for our panel? It was that good, you all? Look, I'm like, it was that good, huh? All right, let's see. We have some. Oh, okay. I spoke too soon. Let's see. All right. So it is so difficult for caregivers to find sources to address their own mental health. Aside from just finding the time, there is also sometimes the negative stigma. Oh, I'm so glad we had a question around that. We just didn't get to it. Okay, around stigma, needing mental health support and the fear of being judged. Have any of you experienced this and found ways to address it? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about that stigma, and how you found ways to address it. Panel, Dr. Crumbley, I open it up to you all.
Well, for me,
Yeah, Angela, please.
well, for me with the stigma, one that I used to hear a lot from my African American community, um, don't go to school and tell the people, or the Caucasian people going to be in your business. And then when I thought about everything that I've been through in life, when I got abused, that wasn't a Caucasian person. My mother was African American. When I looked at the people in my own family that abused me, that wasn't Caucasian. So that kind of broke the stigma for me, and people saying what goes on in your house, stay in your house. It's no such thing as mental health, when it really was. It kind of made a lot of sense once I kept getting in trouble with the law. That's one thing that I like to bring up in education. Why do it take us to have to either experience death or go to prison in order to get the help, and someone tells you, versus identifying it in schools or in doctor's office and stuff like that? So I'm big on want to break the stigma when it comes to people saying why we shouldn't seek the help, and to be judged. Sometimes, like if you tell someone, "Hey, I'm hungry," with all the requirements that they ask you to fill out, you'll just be like, "I'm better off starving." So and it's just a lot of things that doesn't really help you. I remember someone coming in my house and said, "How can I help you?" And I'm like, "If I knew that, you wouldn't be here. I don't even know what help looked like." So,
Wow, powerful. Thank you so much, Angela. Angela, this reminds me, earlier we talked about this idea of looking again, because you went to seek support and services, right? And there was stigmas, and we talked about the stigmas of what that meant for you, or what that felt like at that time. And you just said you had to keep digging, right? And it was there. So thank you so much. Anyone else want to speak to that question? That's a really good question, of the negative stigmas that existed around mental health, and how you found ways to address it. Brittany, Bob?
I think when I think about the professionals, we've had something to do with creating the stigma. See, now I'm starting to show my age. See, 40 years ago, yeah, 40 years ago, when we started working with kinship caregivers, we didn't make it safe for kinship caregivers to talk about the ambivalence that they felt. We didn't make it safe for caregivers to talk about the embarrassment they felt. We didn't make it safe for caregivers to admit that they were having second thoughts. So caregivers, and then the race issue came up there as well. The system didn't make it safe for people of color, to share who and what they were, because all the sharing could result in the children being taken from us.
Mm.
So when I think about what you just said, Angela, and how we didn't make it safe, I can certainly respond in terms of what the system needs to do to make it feel safe for caregivers, to take away the stigma, so the caregivers can now start coming and ask for help. So let me start with what professionals need to do.
Mm.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving that perspective, Dr. Crumley, which is so important, right? We have to create those safe spaces for people to feel safe to come to us. Thank you, thank you,
And
thank you.
normalize those feelings. Caregivers are supposed to feel those things.
Mm.
Everything Angela and Bob and Brittany talk about, you're supposed to feel afraid, unsure, ambivalent. You're supposed to want to get toe down, messed up,
Yes,
avoid this stuff. You're supposed to want to get away from it. Normalize it,
normal.
validate it, and that's how you can now make folks feel safe.
Come
I'm
on.
sorry.
Mic drop, emoji drop. There we go. I can't drop the mic. I'll drop the emoji. Okay, so our next question for our panelists is, well, for everyone, how can we reach the audience more into schools, to reach more into schools? How can we reach more
Yeah.
audiences in school settings?
So I got a total answer for that. So when I was a young person, I experienced chronic youth homelessness. So I remember sleeping in a car, in a ditch, in dirty motels, in tents, and I didn't know where to go for help. And so, I told my school about this, and they were super, and homelessness and mental health coincide a lot. When you're homeless, you can't take care of your mental health, right? And when you can't take care of your mental health, you can become homeless. And my school, like my high school, gave me, and I was privileged in this way, like gave me all these resources. And what I mean by resources, for example, my principal set up a literal bed in the principal's office to sleep at and miss a couple classes so I could sleep, because she knew I was sleeping in a car that night. They gave me Christmas gifts. I will never forget my freshman year coming into school clothes that I wore for 2 weeks straight. They gave me new clothes. Or, I remember, because I was homeless, bouncing around once every 3 days from, dirty houses, friends' houses, couch surfing, cars, tents. I had all my stuff in the car. Like I had all my stuff carrying it around with me in school. Like I had my garbage bags full of things, the only few clothes that I had that I owned, and I was putting them under the bleachers during basketball practice. So during basketball practice, that's when I would like get stuff out of my little trash bags, to change into clothes, do my hygiene in the school gym, take showers in the school gym. And I remember like they gave me a safe place to put all my belongings that I had to carry with me to and from school, because I didn't have an address, right? And so the resources that helped me, and let me just say this, like it was a miracle almost. The reason I got connected to such good resources at school is because and this is a sign from God, Jesus Christ himself. When I was sleeping in a ditch, right? Like literally in a ditch at 14 years old, this piece of crumbly paper, it was windy outside, came crumbling to the ditch that I was laying at. I'm not even joking. Like this sounds like something from a movie. And I opened up the flyer, and it was for McKinney-Vento Act, which is like what supports homeless students in schools. So I contacted the number on the flyer that crumbled over from the wind to the ditch I was sleeping at, opened the flyer, called the phone number, and they connected me with all these resources. And so through my trials and tribulations and traumas, I have 2 master's degrees, right? I have my master's of social work. I'm getting my second master's in public policy. And just like Dr. Joseph Crumpley, I'm going to be Dr. Brittany Barros, okay? And so I keep racking up these degrees because like school has always been my safe haven. Like school has always been my place where I could thrive and go from surviving to thriving, right? And so this long-winded explanation to say to put the resources in the school, it shouldn't take, a miracle where, a piece of paper is floating in the wind to the ditch where a homeless child is living in, right? We need to make these resources known, available to families. We need to do active recruitment and retention for these programs, and definitely getting the schools involved, because a lot of schools do have mental health supports. They do have homeless youth supports. They do have foster care youth supports. So making sure that these resources are available to families, are recruiting families successfully, and having a diversity, equity, inclusion / accommodation lens to it, right? And so that's what I'm gonna say about that. Mic drop, emoji drop, boom,
All
bam,
of
bing.
it. You said it perfectly, Brittany. Say no more. Thank you so much for your wisdom. And in our eyes, you are already doctor, ma'am, PhD, and lived experience, and all of it.
Yes.
Listen.
Thank
That
you.
part. All right. Well, let's see. We have a couple of more. So we'll take, how much time do we have, team? Can somebody give me something in the chat, just letting me know? I want to honor everyone's time. Oh, 9 minutes. We're doing, you all are doing.
Good. I want to piggyback on what Brittany said, because this is not just the school system. This is the mental health system. This is the healthcare system. This is the legal system. All the systems need to identify families. They need to be set up to identify families that have these needs. When folks get registered, the school systems, whatever system should be saying, should be asking questions like, are you caring for a child in your home that's not related to you? As soon as you check that box, that should just bring out a whole, like Brittany said, a whole list, that a whole drop sheet should just be dropping down for everything, because they've now identified a kinship family. See, some kinship caregivers don't even know they're doing kinship care. Don't even know it. All right. So that's why you have to have those leading questions that identify and allow caregivers to self-identify. You need to have those leading questions that identify Brittany and the people that are sleeping. Where are you sleeping at night? Who are you living with? If you ask those students those kind of questions at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, you are now, and do you live with somebody else other than your birth parent? Just being able to ask those kind of questions should trigger those kind of issues. So again, I'm looking at what the system needs to do in order to identify those families and get those resources. So that's the piggyback on what Brittany has said. What the system needs, because Brittany's school was incredible. The quilt, the lunch, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny how you mentioned that, Dr. Joseph Crumbly. We're on the same page here, because I didn't even mention a quilt, but I did get a beautiful quilt for my school too, a blanket,
Wow, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
They were looking for you, Brittany. They knew that there were Brittany's out here, that there was a Brittany that we needed to find. Okay. And that's what that system did. And then just like we need to know that there are caregivers out here, and we have to, find a transportation system. On the buses, are you caring for a child that's not that's not biologically yours? If you are a caregiver, call this number. Self-identify. And then, like you said, Angela, then get the stigma out the way.
Yeah.
If we normalize it.
There it is.
Bob had to do, oh, let me stop. See, I guess I'm feeling like I know y'all now. I'm just meeting these folks, by the way.
We
But I
all
feel
know
like
you, you're kindred spirits.
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. So you know what? I will say this. We don't have time to get around to all the questions. You all shocked me and blew me away in the chat with all these questions. And so if you want to follow up, our team is going to drop in the chat how to reach Generations United in the chat. And, if our panelists want to connect, you all feel free to throw your information in the chat. How folks could stay connected with you. We'll do it that way. And we're going to answer 2 more questions just for the essence of time. And so the next, and I'm just going in order as they're received. What family therapy strategies would you use? And Dr. Crumley, I'm going to send that your way. What family therapy strategies would you use? And I would encourage the panelists as well, because you all are experts as well, to jump into. What family strategy, therapy strategies would you use?
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at, some systemic, because everybody in that family was impacted by caregivers, the grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. It's systemic. Bob is a perfect example. I compliment you. You had a uncle who became a caregiver. You know, so it could be an uncle, it could be an aunt, it could be cousins. We got Brittany who could be systems. Who was a sister. So yeah. One of the things I do is genograms. Y'all know that word, okay? And those genograms are all over the place, and it's being able to have a family therapy approach that involves and looks at the whole family and how it impacts the whole family. And who we haven't talked about is that birth parent. We've got to get whatever systems you're involved in as far as therapy, please bring in the birth parent, because they are powerful. They've got to be able to say, when grandmom speaks or when uncle speaks, he speaks for me. That's powerful, even
Yes.
if they can't do it themselves. All right, just to be able to say, when they're their role models, I want you to listen to them, and you don't have to be worried about me not loving you because you love and listen to Grandmom Angela or Uncle Bob or Big Sister Brittany.
Mm. It takes us all, especially involving being
Mhm.
inclusive of birth parents.
Yeah, birth parents have to be involved
Absolutely.
in your therapy or whatever system you're going to be using.
Yeah. Thank you. Panel, I'm curious to hear what family therapy strategies have worked for your family.
Me and my granddaughter, we take she do individual, and then when she wants me to come in, and what she tells me all the time, this is our healing season. So she
Beautiful.
calls it that instead of therapy. She said, Grandma, we're going to go, this is our healing season.
I'm gonna
So
start using that in therapy, Angela. I'm gonna.
yeah,
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah.
This is a
So
healing seed. What you think, Brittany? That was great. You a
yeah, so
therapist?
she teaches me that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I'm a licensed social worker, so I do more macro social work, but technically I can do therapy with my credentials. And one of the things that I learned about healing in my schooling and then through my personal experiences, just like Dr. Crumbly said, is it's ecosystems, like the ecological components of like the micro, the meso, the macro, like how all these components and all these systems and all these units that impact the family. We can't just look at the brain chemical going from A to B or the neuron going from C to D, right? Like we got to look at the whole holistic approach to our families.
Yes, thank you all so much. So we have to wrap up as we're closing. But as we're closing, if you want to give, just a piece of advice really quickly before we turn it over to our very own Donna, what piece of advice would you all share with families when it comes to, just people coping, families, grandfamilies coping with mental health challenges?
I teach my granddaughter to leave room for error.
Mm.
And just that grace. Each time, even when her school calls me and always say how she had a bad day, I said, in all that she's been through, for her to even get up, get on the bus, she can't, she's 8 years old, she can't read, and she just had so many teeth pulled, and she's just 8. She's more, I told her, sometimes some people is not even strong enough to be weak. I said, so with that being said, I leave room for error. She's not in trouble. What she is doing is trying to find her way. So each day when she wake up, I tell her, choose hard. She's like, choose hard. And I tell her that because life is hard. So if I just prepare her now, I don't have to set her up for make believe and what's realistic. So
Say
every
that
day
again, Angela. What was it? Truth.
I tell her to choose hard. If we choose the hard way, it's
Choose
always
hard
the
way.
best way.
Choose hard.
Choose hard. So a lot of times they'll tell us, oh, it'll get easier. It is going to get better. But I teach her how to choose hard because I know her journey ahead is going to be hard for her. So I just prepare.
Thank you. Any other wise words? And I'm seeing all the notifications, so
Oh,
let's.
so I'll say something if it's okay. I'll say something really quick. Part of the mental health thing. I would say the pairing of a therapist with the child, in particular, what's happening in their life is important. Obviously, we went through quite a bit of therapists through the county for various different reasons. Um, some of them, their jaws dropped when they heard the stories, and they had just graduated. They couldn't smell it, they couldn't taste it. They had, they could see it in a book, but they just didn't understand. So when you find a therapist like we finally did for our niece that can talk the talk and, don't play by the quote unquote top rules, they actually get in and dig down and try to help. And that's what I think that's what saved my niece, was somebody that stepped in, kind of became her parent, and held her accountable. And working with that therapist on the same page is so important, just like co-parenting would be.
Wow.
And
Thank
then
you.
I would just end is tap into your network, tap into your resources. We're often scared to ask for help. No, you better ask for that Section 8. You better ask for that therapist. You better ask for that government funded food program. Tap in, like those homeless shelters, food pantries, mentors, professors that I've had. I wouldn't be who I am today without the networks and connections and love and grace that my community has given me. So reach out for help when you need it.
Yes. Thank
That's
you.
that self-love Angela's talking about, y'all.
Amen.
I deserve it. You deserve it.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. We all deserve it. Well, thank you all so much. As we close our panel, I just want to extend a special thanks to all of our phenomenal panelists today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to our grand families across the country who are caring for our nation's children, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Crumbley. It's been an honor and it's been fun. I'm going to turn it over to our lovely Donna and hang around for last remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm coming back just trying to find the mic. I'm in awe. What powerful personal stories and wisdom that you shared in such a courageous way. But please do stay just for a couple more minutes so we can talk about doing exactly what Brittany challenged us to do, which is to turn pain into power, into policy. Because we know that grandparents raising grandchildren, uncles, aunts deserve and need our support and our help. We need you to lift your voices along with us if we're going to make a difference and continue to make a difference in this country. So in the report, we do lay out a few recommendations. And one I think that you saw so powerfully today is engage grandfamilies in the design and implementation of services that impact them. Nothing about us without us. You've heard they know what they need. They know what they want. So be sure to engage people authentically. Increase affordability, quality, and trauma-informed mental health treatment and training for young people and caregivers and grandfamilies so they learn more skills to be able to cope. Provide healthcare workers, mental health workers, educational providers with training and resources so they know how to work with and how to relate to some of these important issues. Collect national data that helps us all inform policymakers. Create a pathway for peer-to-peer supports. We know through our grand voices and just what you saw today, as Dr. Crumbley said, we become a support community with each other, and that peer-to-peer support is so important. And especially right now, encourage states to use opioid settlement funds to support grandfamilies' mental health needs and wellness. So many states are focusing their money on treatment, which is important. We can't forget the families that are left behind, the children that are left behind. And this is a unique opportunity in our time. So please download the report, look at the recommendations, join forces, join voices, because that's what makes a difference. I was fortunate to just be in Chicago with a wonderful group of support group leaders and grandparents and other relatives raising children. And the name of the support group was Gift of Hope. And it's because, as one grandmother said, it's because we are the hope. Hope needs help to flourish. If we can provide the help, grandfamilies will nurture the hope. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you again to our amazing, amazing presenters and panelists for sharing all you did. Thank you.